The first contact between humans and the alien visitors did not take place in space above the stars, or on the surface of a foreign planet. It happened in silence, inside a world of artificial landscapes created from light and code. The aliens had come forward with a proposal soon after their great ships appeared near Earth. They wished to meet and speak, but they feared that direct physical interaction might bring danger. The bodies of each species carried unknown risks, and their cultures carried fragile trust that could easily shatter. So instead of gathering in flesh and blood, they opened a gateway into a shared space, a kind of dream that both sides could enter safely. It was called the Bridge. The bridge was not like Earth and not like the alien homeworld. It was something between the two, shifting and changing with every step. Mountains of green grass rose beside towers of smooth black stone. The sky above carried two suns, one gold like the human day star and another pale silver, thin and unfamiliar. Trees from Earth grew side by side with tall alien spires of crystal that hummed softly as though alive. It was a place where nothing felt fixed, where reality bent like water, yet it was strangely beautiful. Into this space walked the first group of human volunteers, young men chosen for their courage and steady minds. They wore no armor and carried no weapons, only simple suits that allowed them to move freely in the digital air. At first, their steps echoed faintly as if they were walking in a great hall. Then the ground softened beneath them, grass spreading under their feet, changing according to the will of the architects who had designed the bridge. They did not know what to expect, only that the alien request had been clear. Let us meet your males first. We wish to understand them. Waiting for them on the other side were the alien females. Their forms were not entirely human, yet in this shared space, they had shaped themselves into figures that would not terrify. They were taller, their movements slower and more graceful, and their eyes carried a shine that looked almost liquid, reflecting emotions that humans could not name. They stood in quiet rows, watching, curious but not hostile, as if studying every motion and every breath of the men who had stepped into their world. The humans exchanged uncertain glances. They had been told this would be an exploration, not an interrogation. Yet the intensity of the alien gaze felt heavy, almost as if the men were standing under a microscope. The silence stretched until one alien female raised her hand. The ground rippled and shifted, forming a vast circle around them, a ring of light that closed off the horizon. Then she spoke, her voice not heard by ears but felt inside the mind. Here, nothing can harm you. Here, we wish to know what it means to be you. The words settled in their thoughts, and the men felt a shiver run through them. This was not a test of strength or weapons. It was something stranger. The aliens had created this virtual world for one purpose only, to step inside the minds of humans, to explore not only their bodies but their hearts and the hidden corners of their nature. At that moment, standing in a world that was both dream and reality, the men realized that first contact was not about politics or trade or even survival. It was about something far more unsettling. The alien females wanted to explore humanity itself, and they had chosen the men before them as the first path. The men did not know how long they had stood inside the circle of light, because in the bridge time seemed to move in a different way sometimes, faster sometimes slower, and sometimes as if it was not moving at all. The alien females began to step forward, and the circle widened as if the world itself wanted to give them more space to move. The air shimmered and new shapes appeared, tall pillars, glowing softly like lamps, then fields of sand stretching outward, and a vast sky above that now carried 3 moons. The aliens were changing the scene as easily as a human child would turn the page of a book, and the men realized that the bridge was not a place but a living stage for whatever the aliens wished to explore. One of the alien Females gestured with a long hand, and suddenly the men found themselves standing at the edge of what looked like a battlefield. The ground was cracked and burned as if a great fire had passed through it. Towers of smoke rose in the distance, and the air smelled of ash. Though it was only a simulation, the details felt painfully real. The aliens stood apart, watching with bright, curious eyes, and one of them spoke in that same voice which pressed into the mind. "Instead of the ears," she asked. A question not about strength or victory, but about fear. She wanted to see how the men would act when the world around them seemed dangerous. At first the men did not move. They waited, watching the alien expressions which were unreadable. Then the ground shook and a giant shadow appeared rising above the broken earth. A creature formed out of dark smoke stepped forward. Its shape was not clear, but its size was enough to fill the sky, and its roar rolled across the battlefield. The men were unarmed, yet something in the simulation demanded action. Some ran forward, trying to face the monster with their bare hands. Others pulled together as if to protect one another, and one even shouted, though the sound was swallowed by the strange air. The alien females watched intently, not at the shadow beast, but at the choices the men made. When the shadow faded, the ground changed again. The battlefield dissolved into a calm riverbank with tall green grass and the sound of flowing water. The men stood breathing hard, as if the struggle had been real. Sweat touched their brows, though no heat had burned them. The aliens stepped closer now, and one of them bent down to look into the eyes of a man who had shielded another with his body. She did not speak, but her gaze carried a question, and he answered with words that came slowly, yet simply. He said that even in danger, it was natural to protect someone else. Alien tilted her head and repeated softly, as if tasting the meaning of the words, "to protect another." The scenes continued to shift. The next space appeared as a small village made of both human houses and alien structures side by side. Children's laughter echoed, though no children were there, and food scents drifted from invisible kitchens. The men were asked to solve problems together. Water lines broke, fires needed to be stopped, supplies had to be shared. At first they stumbled, confused by the sudden changes, but soon they began to work side by side, organizing quickly with simple plans. One lifted beams, another carried buckets, another gave directions. They did not notice at first, but the alien females had joined quietly, not to help, but to observe up close, their eyes following every gesture, every word, every expression. It became clear that the aliens were not testing strength or knowledge in the way humans might test machines. Instead, they were fascinated by emotions. The way one man grew frustrated when water spilled from his hands, the way another encouraged him with a quick smile, the way they laughed even when tired. These small details seemed to capture more of the aliens' attention than the success or failure of the task. When one man joked lightly to ease the tension, an alien asked him why he laughed even when the problem was not solved. He explained that laughter makes the burden lighter, and that it keeps hope alive even when things go wrong. The alien repeated the word hope slowly, and her voice trembled faintly, as if the meaning pressed against something she had long forgotten. The tests grew stranger. The men were placed in a great hall filled with puzzles of light, shifting walls, changing symbols, endless doors that opened into more doors. They had to find their way together, but every time one grew impatient and tried to break through alone, the path collapsed. Only when they trusted each other, only when they listened and cooperated, did doors open and the hall release them. The alien females observed closely, asking questions at each step. Why did you wait for him? Why did you choose to trust? Why did you not leave when you could have escaped alone? And each time the men gave their answers, simple but honest. They said because it felt right, because leaving another behind was not the way, because sometimes survival meant nothing if it was achieved without others. Bit by bit, the aliens' calm and perfect masks began to show cracks. Their questions became less like a scientist and more like someone searching for something lost. One asked quietly, "What does it mean to miss someone when they are gone?" Another asked, "Why do you sing when you are sad?" And still another whispered, "Why does pain make you stronger?" the men tried to explain in their own words, using stories of family, of friends, of long nights and struggles, of moments when despair gave way to courage. The aliens listened in silence, as if drinking water after centuries of thirst. By the time the session ended, the men were exhausted. Even though their bodies had not truly moved much, their minds had been stretched, pulled into places they had never expected. They realized that the aliens were not just studying them like subjects in an experiment, but were searching for something much deeper. They seemed hungry not for data or numbers, but for feelings, for the invisible strength that ran through the human spirit. As the bridge shifted one last time, returning to the calm meadow where it had first begun, the alien females stood, closed, their tall forms casting long shadows in the soft grass. They no longer looked distant or cold. Their eyes now carried something warmer, a light that was fragile but growing. One of them spoke softly, not as a command or a question, but almost as a confession. She said, "We cannot create what you carry within you. We can only watch and wonder and learn." And with those words, the humans understood that this exploration was not ending, but only beginning, and the true purpose of the aliens' curiosity was still hidden just beyond reach. The meadow shimmered like a painted dream, and then slowly dissolved into a new setting, as if the bridge itself wanted to reveal another secret layer. The men found themselves inside a wide-open plain beneath a sky filled with shifting clouds that glowed with colors both familiar and strange. Some clouds were golden as a morning sun, while others carried the blue fire of alien stars. And under that glowing ceiling, the men noticed something different this time. The air was heavier, the silence deeper, as if the space they had entered carried the weight of something important waiting to unfold. In the middle of the plain stood a group of alien females, taller than before, their eyes brighter, as if charged with an unseen fire. They no longer stood in rows like careful observers, but moved closer in a circle that slowly closed around the men. There was no hostility in their approach, but there was an intensity that made the men feel as though every step and every breath mattered. One of the aliens lifted her hand, and the plain changed into a scene of chaos. Flames rose on the horizon, great towers fell in the distance, and rivers turned red like molten fire. The ground shook and opened with cracks as if the world itself was about to end. The men felt the pull of fear, yet none of them turned away. They looked at one another and instinctively grouped together as they had done before. The alien who had raised her hand spoke in the shared voice that touched thought rather than ears. She said, "This is the last trial. Show us not what you can do, but what you choose when everything is taken from you." As she spoke, the ground split open, and monstrous forms rose from the cracks, shaped from shadows and flames. They were not clear creatures, but nightmares shifting between many shapes. They charged forward, roaring with soundless rage. The men had nothing but their bare hands, yet they moved at once. One of them stood in front, his arms spread wide as if to hold back the storm. Another grabbed the nearest shadow, even though it burned like fire, and he shouted for the others to move. The rest stayed close, their bodies trembling, but their feet steady. The alien females did not help. They only watched, their eyes filled with an emotion that seemed unfamiliar even to them. Some tilted their heads as if confused by the men's refusal to run. Others leaned forward as if yearning to understand something hidden in the human struggle. The scene grew darker, the flames rose higher, the shadows closed in, and then one man made a choice. He threw himself toward the largest shadow, wrapping his arms around it, even as it swallowed him in a surge of fire. His cry was brief but powerful, and in that moment, the other men surged forward, pulling one another away from the collapsing ground. The sacrifice allowed them to survive the final wave of shadows. As the plain broke apart around them, the world froze and then shattered into pieces of light. The plain, the flames, the monsters, all vanished, leaving only silence and the men, breathing heavily in a space of endless white. They realized the simulation had ended, but the weight of the choice still pressed in their hearts. The man who had thrown himself into the fire reappeared, whole unharmed because nothing in the bridge could take a life. Yet his action remained etched in the memory of all who had seen it. Alien females stepped forward, and for the first time their faces changed, their calm masks softened, and their liquid eyes glimmered as if tears threatened to fall, though no tears formed. They gathered around the man who had given himself up for the others, and one of them reached out her long hand, not to test, not to measure, but to touch gently the side of his arm. She asked not with command but with quiet wonder, "Why did you do this when you knew you could not win?" The man looked at her with simple honesty and replied, "Because if someone must fall, let it be me, not them. That way the others will have a chance to live." He spoke the words without pride or drama, but with plain truth. The alien drew back slightly as if the meaning of those words struck her deeper than anything she had ever known. She whispered softly, "To fall for another, we cannot imagine such a choice." The other aliens moved closer, now their gazes full of intensity. They asked more questions, not about puzzles or strength, but about feelings. Why do you protect one another when it hurts you? Why do you smile when you are broken? Why do you comfort others when you yourself suffer? The men gave their answers, slowly searching for simple words, because the questions felt larger than language. They said because life has value, because kindness heals, even when pain remains, because no one should face darkness alone. Each answer made the alien females pause and repeat the words as if holding fragile treasures in their minds. It became clear to the men that these beings were not cold scientists as they had first seemed. They were seekers searching for something their own kind no longer carried. Their technology could build worlds out of light and reshape reality like clay, but they could not create the warmth of sacrifice or the fire of loyalty. They could not simulate courage or laughter or the stubborn hope that kept humans moving, even when the world fell apart. The bridge gave them endless power over shape and form, yet it could not give them what burned inside the human heart. The silence stretched between them, and in that silence, something shifted. The aliens no longer looked like distant figures from another world. They looked almost fragile in their hunger for something beyond logic. The men began to feel not like subjects of an experiment, but like teachers sharing lessons they had never thought of as lessons. One alien finally said in a trembling voice, "We thought to study you, but it is we who are being changed." The space of white slowly softened into a twilight sky filled with stars. Both human and alien, the bridge shaped itself to reflect the mood of its hosts, and the new world felt calm like a quiet evening before a great decision. The men stood together, weary, yet proud, sensing that something important had begun. The aliens stood across from them, silent, but no longer cold. Their glowing eyes flickered like small flames lit for the first time after ages of darkness. At that moment, first contact stopped being about exploration or knowledge. It became something deeper and more uncertain. The aliens were no longer simply curious about humans. They were touched by them, moved by them, drawn toward them. And the men felt it too, an invisible connection that could not be explained by science or simulation. It was the turning point of their shared story, a place where both sides realized that the experiment was no longer an experiment, but the beginning of a bond that neither had expected, yet both could no longer deny. The twilight sky of the bridge stretched wide and calm, but that calm was not to last for long, because the alien females had gathered once more, and their voices carried a weight that told the men something greater was about to begin. They had tested fear and courage, they had studied loyalty and sacrifice, they had listened to the laughter and the sorrow that humans carried in their hearts. Yet, now they wanted something more, not a simple display of reaction, but a true joining of choices. The air thickened, as if the bridge itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next design to be shaped. The tallest of the alien females stepped forward and raised both hands, and the world broke apart and remade itself in an instant. This time the men found themselves standing inside a massive city, unlike any they had ever seen. Towering structures of crystal and steel rising into the sky, bridges of light stretching from one side of the horizon to the other, towers filled with sound and color and energy that made the ground tremble beneath their feet. But the beauty of the city was broken. For even as it rose with grandeur, it was under attack. Shadows poured from the edges of the horizon, devouring towers, collapsing bridges, filling the air with roars that shook the sky. The city was alive yet dying, and the men were placed in the very heart of it. The alien female spoke again, her voice trembling with something that felt almost like emotion. She said, "This is the crisis we cannot face alone. Show us if you will stand with us, or if you will flee and save yourselves." The words struck deep into the hearts of the men, because they realized this was not only another test, but something that carried the reflection of a truth within the aliens themselves. They were not only crafting a simulation, but revealing a wound in their spirit. A fear of collapse, a hunger for a strength they no longer carried. The shadows surged forward, rising into monstrous forms, their limbs made of fire and smoke, their eyes burning like molten glass. The city screamed with silent destruction, and the men moved as one, though none had weapons and none had armor. They picked up broken shards of crystal, they tore beams from fallen towers, they used what the city gave them, and they fought not only for survival, but for the protection of those beside them. One man lifted a collapsed beam to free another trapped beneath. Another shouted orders directing the group where to move and where to strike. They were not warriors trained for battle, yet they became warriors because the moment demanded it. Alien females stood in a circle, their tall figures shimmering in the chaos. They did not act, but they watched with eyes that no longer looked detached. Their gazes trembled with light, as if sparks of unfamiliar feeling burned within them. One of them whispered, though her voice touched only the thoughts of the men, "Why do you struggle when you cannot win? Do you stand when you will fall?" The men did not answer with words at first, but with action. They pulled one another up, they pushed forward against the tide, they stood back to back, refusing to break. Even when fire licked at their forms and shadow claws cut through the air, they did not give in. At last one man cried out above the roar of destruction, "Because we are together, that is why we stand, that is why we fight." His voice was raw and simple, but it carried across the collapsing city, and the alien females felt the meaning press into them harder than any battle. Strike, the words wrapped around them like warmth in a cold, endless night. The bridge trembled as if shaken by the emotions that surged through the simulation. The shadows grew larger, the destruction more violent, yet the men did not fall. Instead, they found strength in their unity. Their movements became sharper, their voices louder, their hearts steadier. They built walls of broken stone. They formed lines of defense. They saved not only themselves but the alien avatars, who now appeared among them confused and fragile. The aliens had not expected to be saved within their own creation, yet the men pulled them from the ruins, shielded them from fire, and carried them through the storm. The act of protection struck deeper than any explanation could. One alien female stumbled, her tall form cracking under the force of a shadow strike. She fell to the ground, unable to rise, and for a moment, her liquid eyes dimmed as if the light inside her would fade. But a human man rushed forward without hesitation, lifting her across his shoulders and carrying her through the wreckage. Even though flames burned at his side, the other men fought to cover his path, shouting to one another, giving all their strength to keep the way clear. The alien female clung to him, her long fingers grasping his shoulder, and for the first time her voice came not in thought, but in sound, raw and trembling. She whispered, Why do you not leave me?" He answered simply, "Because leaving you would mean leaving part of ourselves." The city shuddered one last time, as if breaking apart completely, and then the destruction froze. The shadows halted mid-strike. The flames hung in the air, unmoving. The bridge released a long echo, like the sigh of a sleeping giant, and then everything dissolved into quiet. Once again the men stood in the endless white space, but this time the alien female stood closer than ever. Their eyes shone not only with curiosity, but with something fragile and unfamiliar, something that looked like the beginning of trust, or perhaps even something more. The Tallest alien stepped forward, her voice softer than before. We created this crisis because it is what we fear most. Collapse of our world, loss of our connection. We can fight with our machines, we can bend reality with our knowledge, but we cannot face the breaking of bonds because we no longer have them. Her gaze swept over the men, and she continued, "You have shown us what it means to hold one another, even when all falls apart. We did not believe it was real, yet now we have felt it through." Youth men stood silently, breathing deeply, still carrying the weight of the struggle. Though their bodies had not truly bled, their spirits had burned, and the fire of the trial still pulsed within them. They realized that the aliens were not seeking warriors or slaves or subjects. They were searching for something lost within themselves, the power of unity, the strength of connection, the will to sacrifice for one another. And they had found it not in their own kind, but in the hearts of humans. The kohuv tu endi found it the gupikotadi. Silence that followed was not empty, but heavy with meaning. Both sides felt the fragile bond forming stronger and stronger. The men knew they had passed through something more than a test, and the aliens knew they had revealed more of themselves than they had ever intended. The bridge had brought them together, through fear, through struggle, through sacrifice, and now it held them in a moment of choice. Would they move forward into a shared path, or would they step back into the safety of distance? The answer would shape not only their meeting but the future of both worlds. White space of the bridge stretched wide like an endless horizon, and both humans and aliens stood facing each other, breathing the weight of what had just been shared. The men still felt the memory of fire and shadow burning in their chests, though their bodies showed no wounds. The alien female stood silent, their tall forms trembling slightly as if the storm of emotion inside them could no longer be hidden. The glow in their eyes no longer looked cold or distant, but alive with something that had not existed when they first stepped into the bridge. The tallest alien moved closer, her steps slow and careful, as if she feared the space between them would break if crossed too quickly. Her voice, when it came, was softer than the wind itself. "We built this place so we could study you at a safe distance. We wanted to understand without risk, without touch, without fear. But what we have learned is not what we expected. You have shown us sacrifice, trust, hope, and something we thought was gone from our kind long ago." She paused, her words trembling inside the men's minds, and then she said, "You have reminded us of connection and of feeling that we cannot make with machines and cannot write into our codes." The men listened in silence. Some of them exchanged glances, trying to understand the depth of what she meant. For them, sacrifice and loyalty had never been mysteries. They were simply choices shaped by life itself. But for these alien females, those things were treasures they had never truly known. And now they looked at the men not as subjects, but as carriers of something precious. One of the aliens stepped forward, her voice breaking as she whispered, "We have knowledge and power and endless tools, yet all of it is empty without the fire you hold inside. We feared you might not share it, but you have given it freely, and we cannot repay such a gift except with truth." The bridge shifted again, and this time it revealed not a test or a trial, but an image of the alien homeworld. The sky carried colors unlike Earth, a deep violet with streaks of silver and great towers stretching like spines into the heavens. Yet the world looked silent, almost hollow, like a beautiful vessel with no warmth inside. The alien females gestured toward it, their faces dim with sorrow, and one explained, "Our people are strong in body and mind, but we have lost our hearts. We do not laugh, we do not weep, we do not sacrifice. We survive, but we do not live. That is why we searched for you. That is why we reached out to your kind." The men felt the weight of those words. They had not expected that first contact would carry such a burden. They had thought perhaps it would be about trade, about peace, about alliances or technology. But now they understood that it was something deeper than all of that. The aliens were not seeking weapons or resources. They were seeking humanity itself. The bridge had been their way of knocking on the door of the human soul, and now that door had been opened. One of the men stepped forward, his voice steady. He said, "If you wish to learn then, we will teach not as masters, not as owners, but as friends. And equals we are not perfect, and we carry darkness too. But if you want hope and feeling and connection, then walk with us, and we will walk with you." His words were plain without grand speech, yet they struck like fire into the hearts of those who listened. The alien females bowed their heads, slowly as if the meaning pressed too heavy for words, and then one lifted her gaze and spoke softly. "We accept. We will not study you as subjects. We will stand beside you as companions." The bridge trembled gently and then shaped itself into a new scene. A great hall formed from both human and alien design. Long tables of stone and light tall windows, showing a sky filled with stars, banners that carried no symbols yet glowed with warmth. It was not a test this time. It was a promise, a vision of what both species could share if they chose. The men and the aliens stood together inside that hall, and for the first time the silence between them felt not heavy but peaceful. The tallest alien raised her hand and spoke one last time. "We have taken knowledge from countless stars, but none of it gave us what you gave us here. We could create endless worlds of light, yet none of them carried the spark of life. You have given us what we could not simulate. You have given us hope, and hope is the first step toward everything." Men felt those words echo deep inside them, and they knew the meaning of their journey was complete. They had entered the bridge, uncertain, afraid even of what the aliens wanted from them, and they had walked through trials that tested not their bodies but their hearts. Now they stood not as test subjects but as partners. The first step of a bond had been made not with weapons or contracts, but with trust and emotion. And as the bridge faded, slowly pulling them back toward the real world, each man carried with him the memory of alien eyes shining with a new light, and alien voices trembling with the fragile birth of feeling when they opened their eyes back in their human bodies. They found the alien females waiting in the physical chamber beyond the machines. Their forms were different from the avatars of the bridge, taller, stranger, less human, yet their gazes were unmistakably warmer than before. One stepped forward and placed her hand gently over her chest, a gesture of respect they had never used before. She said aloud in a voice that cracked with effort, "We will walk with you. We will not forget." The men nodded, and though no celebration was shouted, though no treaty was signed, they knew that a greater bond had been forged. The beginning of a shared future stood before them, fragile yet full of promise. The story of first contact would not be written as war or conquest or fear. It would be remembered as the time when two different worlds found each other, not through strength of arms, but through the strength of the human heart. And so the bridge closed behind them, but the path ahead was open wide, a path lit not by machines or codes or weapons, but by hope that burned like a flame carried in both human and alien hands. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs together, and that was enough. The end.